everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of When I Grow Up. On today's episode, it's my pleasure to welcome my new friend, Helen Kingery. Hey, Helen, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for joining me tonight.
It is my pleasure.
We were just talking about, before I hit record, Helen is a working full-time mom. So basically, she's on the go all the time. And so I really appreciate, more than you know, the time that you're giving me today to chat with me and tell me about your journey a little bit. So without wasting too much more of your time, we'll get started. So Helen, what is it that you do?
So my official title is Associate Director for Communication. I work at Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Specifically, I work in the National Center for Birth Defects and Disabilities, and I work on human development and disability. My topic areas include autism, lifetime disability, hearing loss, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, Fragile X, things like that. Yeah.
Okay, so can you repeat your title one more time for
Of
me?
course, yeah. Associate Director for Communications.
Okay, so like with all the description that you gave, as far as like Associate Director of Communications, what does that even mean? Like in my head, it's like, okay, is that a marketer or what is that? What do you do?
Yeah. So when I try to give a very short answer, I
Uh-huh.
usually just say I'm a writer for the federal government, and then everyone can think what they want to.
Uh-huh.
But I think my role, I just started it actually. So I got this job last month
That's so
permanently.
crazy.
So
Congratulations, by the
thank you
way.
so much. Thank you. Yeah. So the way I like to describe sort of what I do more specifically, like a longer version, is just that I do a lot of collaborating across the agency on topics of disability because it is a cross-cutting issue that affects all kinds of different, topic areas, including COVID and, the heavy hitters. And then within my center and my team, most of my day is spent handling media and general inquiries that come into the CDC on our topics.
Mm-hmm.
I also spend a lot of time reviewing content before it goes out to the public.
Mm-hmm.
I manage a few people. And then I would say I do a lot of strategic planning and situational analysis for our division. So what that means is thinking about our portfolio of work, keeping an eye on, our websites, media attention, kinds of research are currently getting published, and being able to tell a story of what it is that we're doing, accomplishing with the funding that we have been given. So, so I think my role is sort of like that eagle eye view of like what the public views, so that it's kind of cohesive with the rest of the agency. That sort of thing.
Yeah, no, okay, how interesting. As you're talking, I realized, what do I think the CDC does? Like in general, like, I think for me, when I think of Center of Disease Control here in Atlanta, in Georgia, like, growing up here, I knew that it existed here and all the things, but I'm like, like as you're talking, I'm like, maybe I don't realize there's so much more to the CDC than just like health policy. and things like
Hmm.
that. So as far as like, the areas and topics that you said that you are kind of in charge of, as far as communications and things like that and publications, like, what kind of material actually is it like so you said like websites and stuff, but what
Hmm.
other things need to be like reviewed then as far as content that the CDC produces for the public?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So sometimes it's a press release, sometimes it's social
Mm.
media content through, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Um, Sometimes it uh, partner organization outreach. So,
Mhm.
like for example, we do a lot of work with Special Olympics. And so, whenever we have a new release or something that we find could be helpful for partner organizations, we reach out specifically to them, and they either use the tools that we're providing or they push that content out through their networks as well,
Mhm.
so that the most up-to-date research tools and trainings are going out to the people who need them.
I
Um,
see. So are
mhm.
you a writer at heart? Like,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, I feel really lucky. I've always been a writer. Um, and one day hope to write my own book. So I do. I mean, I enjoy writing. It's like definitely a stress relief for me and a creative outlet. And so doing it at work, it's just bonus. I love my job for that in that regard. Yeah,
Really? You love your job? I just feel
I
like,
love it.
I guess the reason I'm asking is like in my head, it's like, okay, creative writing and then writing for the federal government is like seems like two different things. But, but does that mean you just really enjoy the idea of like creating and writing for people to like understand, or what is it that you love about writing? Because I I used to like writing. I don't enjoy it as much as I do anymore, but yeah, what is it that you love about writing?
Yeah, I think one of the things I really like to do is so I don't know if you've ever been in this sort of situation where you draft something and you send it out and like have like a whole bunch of people review it. So like
Okay.
they'll edit it, track changes, red line, like all this stuff. And it's like one of my very favorite things because I hear like 10 different voices in the document and I'm like, okay, how can I make as many people happy as possible so that we're achieving some of the same, priorities as we write this document? So that's like this personal challenge to me of like, how do I make everybody sing the same song? And for the things that we can't achieve together, how can I reframe, or how
Uh-huh.
can I, negotiate with that person? So it's like for me, it's like this like song and this
It's an
this
art.
dance, right? Yeah, it's
That's
so much fun.
crazy, Helen.
Yeah.
I no, I love that so much cuz I'm like I'm in awe because man, you have really found an art to what it is that you do, and I think that I've never viewed writing that way. Like in my personality, if when first of all, like drafting and then getting edits and then having to do it again is like against my personality because I'm like a perfectionist and I want it to be done right the very first time, and
Yeah.
um before so I studied mass media arts, and then I wanted to be like go into video and film, and then right out of college my first job was like a post editor, in
Hmm.
post, but I hated my life because like because I was sitting editing videos for like hours and I'm like and it was never good enough, right? And I was like, this is
Yeah.
horrible. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, but anyways, I just love what you said so much. And I could see the twinkle in your eye, Helen, that you were like, this is what I really enjoy and that you challenge yourself to do that. So like, do you find so much satisfaction when you get it right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's one of my, yeah, it's what it's that's the thing you have the taste for and you're like, okay, let's do that again. Like get to that point where you release all these materials that um everybody agrees on. Everybody's like,
Mm,
yeah, this is the message we want to put out there.
yeah.
It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Release days are always the most fun.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
yeah,
Um, okay, so what I would love to know is you said that you just got this job, this position recently. I know that from just previous conversations with you, you have been with the CDC for a little while now. Is that correct?
that's right. So I've been working there for, I'd say, started in 2012. So 10 years.
Oh my goodness,
Um,
congratulations
this is my
again.
11th year. Yeah.
Decade.
Yeah. So I've worn a lot of hats. I
Mm,
came in as a contractor, um, and I've worn many different hats. So I came in
mm,
as a junior health communicator, worked my way up, became like a deputy, served as a branch chief for a little bit, um, and then I became a team lead. But all the way through, it's always been with health communication. So I've always been a writer, communicator in that lane, and moved through a few different topics. But the time that I spent most of my time, the area that I spent most of my time on was drug overdose. So that's my most recent
I see. I see.
drug
Um,
overdose prevention.
so, um, I don't know how possible this is. I feel like it is possible, but could you rewind all the way back, to even high school?
Ah, yeah.
um, not no, not in the sense that it's not possible. It's just like I know that a decade of work, a lot has happened. So to even just remember what happened before then, I feel like can be challenging at times. But yeah, I would really love to know the journey. Like, did you always enjoy writing? Is there a reason, you went into public health in particular? Yeah, like, it, what was high school like for you, and what did you decide to do as you entered the next stage or chapter of your life?
So this is so funny. I love this question because it's so open, and so I'll just highlight like a couple of things. Um,
Yeah.
in high school, I very clearly remember asking my dad, "What do you think of me becoming a writer, or maybe even a teacher?" And I remember him saying, "I absolutely forbid it." And I was like, "Okay." I mean, I was like shocked, but I was also like,
Oh
"Okay, well,
gosh.
I guess I'm going to be a doctor then."
Oh my gosh. I'm so shocked. People can't see my face, but when you said that, I didn't expect that.
Yeah,
I'm,
I think he was surprised that I was even interested.
mm,
I think, we'd always talked about me becoming a doctor and, I like school well enough. So I thought, well, might as well. It, I mean, might as well become a doctor. That's not what you say, but I didn't have real ambitions, I should say. Like I didn't have like a goal in mind or like
yeah.
a career I wanted. Um, so it's funny that I end up here as a writer, like decades later. Um, but the reason I ended up in public health was actually um, funny. In high school, I felt very called to the missions field. So that
Mm,
was another reason I was considering becoming a doctor because I thought um, even my view of missions was very narrow, and I didn't
mhm.
quite understand what role I could play that would be useful.
Wow, yeah.
So I just knew I wanted to be overseas. I knew that's where my heart came alive. Um, and so, I felt called at a very young age. I think I was like 15 or 16 at the time. So anyway, fast forward just a little bit. I had just finished my college, my first year of college, and I went on a medical missions trip. Um, yeah, it was super fun. I went to the Philippines with a group, a very small group, for about a month. We traveled for almost the whole time. I had all of 1 year of pre-med studies under my belt. And I was like, I'm going to be a medical doctor. Um, um, but I will say, I feel like that is the missions trip that completely allowed me to let go of the dream of becoming a doctor. Um, there was a time we were debriefing after every day. So we would hold a clinic during the day for pretty much the entire day. And then at the end of the day, our team of, I think it's 5 of us, would sit and just talk about the day, pray together, pray about the next day. Um, and I remember one night, one of the nurses started weeping as she was sharing it. She said, I met a lady today who was dying of lung disease, and she was in a lot of pain. And then so I asked her, do you know why you're sick? And she said, of course I know why I'm sick. I smoke cigarettes every day. And
Mm,
so my friend said, well, if you know that's what's making you so sick, why do you smoke cigarettes? And she said, because they're my only joy. Very matter of fact. So then we all
mm,
started weeping because we were like, how could that
mm,
be?
yeah.
So we all felt the heaviness of the lack of joy in that
Mm,
place. And I basically carried that like existential crisis for the rest of the trip because I was thinking like, oh my gosh, like we're here with like Band-Aids and Advil, and that doesn't even touch the surface of the pain and the hurt
mm,
that people are feeling. It's
mm,
not just a physical need. There's like
mm,
so much under there.
mhm,
Um, so that's when I started thinking about like what makes a person. And I started really holding on to the verse, um, John 10:10, where it says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus comes so that we may have life and have it in abundance. And
yeah.
I was like, this isn't abundant life. And how can we say we're bringing abundant life? We are not doing that
Mm,
through this medical trip. It's absolutely necessary, and we were helping people.
yeah.
But inside, I was like, I felt it was empty for me.
Mm,
And so I went home feeling like totally wrecked. I was like,
mm,
what am I doing with my
yeah.
life? So I told like an older student about the trip and how I was feeling. She was also pre-med. And she said, Helen, look into public health. And I was like, what is that? And I started, like voraciously reading about the topic, about the, schools, about, what's possible. And I was like, oh, this is the field. So that everything just clicked for me because it's basically the field of
Mm.
prevention of health conditions, health issues. And so um,
That's what
it's
public health is?
going upstream. Yeah. Um,
Oh.
so it's working hand in hand with doctors. Of course, doctors are needed to like,
Yes.
treat people, but public health is more about, you know, addressing, those upstream issues of like, um, you know, a more holistic view, of a
Okay.
person, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, so for example, um, I got really interested at the time in something called community health evangelism. Um,
Sorry, community health evangelism.
yeah.
Okay.
So it also is that same thing of like looking at a community and entering as a learner and having them figure out what their main issues are, or what they would like to do to solve their problems. And it's coming alongside of that. And it's so interesting because the things that the communities themselves choose, they're not always health issues. You know, they may
Mm.
be financially related or they may be socially related. So like it's this thing of like health isn't just physical health. It's
Mhm.
all connected.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so yeah, that's a really meandering way of saying like my interest in public health uh, for me really brought together um, missions. It brought together my view of what health is, and that it's not just treating a disease. Um, my, life verse of John 10:10
Yeah.
of abundant life. Um, and so, yeah, I ended up not going to school for public health right away, but I did go to school eventually. I got my master's in public health as well.
Wow, that is so fascinating. Thank God for your friend because
Right?
like
She
that's
set
so
me on that path.
crazy. I just
Yeah.
feel like even me right now, I'm like, "Oh, I had no idea." Like that's what public health kind of in encapsulated, I guess. Like and I feel like if I had known that, it makes a lot of sense. Like for me too. I think and I'm assuming parts of it too, as you said earlier, like prevention and stuff like that as well, is just educating people, right, on certain issues and certain I what do you call I guess issues topics but like and it kind of like brings together too even your desire to like be a teacher even, I feel like you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier. Wow, that is so cool. Okay, so you went to school for public. Okay, so that would have been what your sophomore year when you kind of started getting into things. Does that mean you transitioned to public health and then like as an undergrad or?
There are undergrad programs, but I was at the time going to a liberal arts school
Okay,
and that wasn't a thing there. So I continued in taking pre-med classes because they actually are prerequisites for
okay,
most public health degrees.
yeah.
Um,
And I would
so
imagine that
yeah,
that helped you, right? Like in just
yeah,
knowing things.
yeah, it helped a lot. And then I am also just really interested in a lot of different things. So my undergrad degree was actually in cognitive science, which
What?
doesn't even exist there anymore, which that's interesting. I'm a limited edition cognitive science
What
degree
is
major.
cognitive science, Helen? What is that?
It is a combination of psychology,
Uh-huh.
linguistics, philosophy, and computer science. And
Wh-
basically, it is the study of the mind. So when you take it, the psychology is like the hardware of your brain. Philosophy is like where thoughts come from. Linguistics is how we express them. And then computer science is the piece of artificial intelligence. And can we get other computers to think with our mind? That sort of a thing.
Where
So
did you go to school?
I went to a small liberal arts school called Wellesley College. It's up in Massachusetts.
Okay. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I
And the
guess.
reason I picked this major actually, so nothing, I feel like nothing in my life has ever been intentional in terms of like career path. And the reason I chose this major simply was that we were coming to the end of my sophomore year and we were being forced to choose a major at that point. And I had literally taken one class in almost every department across the board. And I didn't have enough credits in any one topic to graduate on time.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
uh,
That
so
is
that's how
so
I picked it.
funny. Okay. Okay. So you graduate with uh this degree.
Yeah.
But for you, always the plan was to go to grad school for public health.
I mean, I thought it was a good idea.
Okay.
I didn't know that I didn't exactly have a plan. And I think that's kind of, you know, funny because it's like the only thing my dad wanted for me was to have a plan. But, um, I think I think the theme across all the years really is just like I have always asked like, God, what do you have for me right now? Like
Mm.
I didn't when I was called into missions in high school, I was like, who needs college?
Right.
I'll just go overseas. So going to college even felt really off track for me. But I did
Mm.
feel very strongly that God was calling me to go to college. So
Mm.
during those years, I was like, God, what do you have for me? Because it's not about the degree. And so, yeah, I think there was so much that God poured into me and matured me in so many different ways in college. That wasn't, again, like wasn't about the actual motions of going to classes and stuff like that. Um, and he just wanted to mature me. I think he achieved more through me after having waited and eventually gone through grad school than if I had gone straight from high school.
Yeah.
So it was in that obedience that
Yeah.
he poured into me.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, right after college, and another theme is like I really haven't chosen my path. I've like applied to things, but literally God has like opened one door. So like
Mm.
even my way into CDC, I would say, I think I applied to like 75 different jobs about that and
Mhm.
then got one job offer out of those. So I really feel like God has been faithful,
Yeah.
like of like when it's time, he'll open the one door.
Wow.
And it's always been that way. So yeah, after college, it sounds like I had a plan, but I didn't. I ended up getting a job, the one job at NIH, and I worked as a research fellow there for a couple of years. And that actually ended up being the experience I needed as a prerequisite to get into grad school.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
um, I didn't plan any of that, but it's like each thing built on the next. And I
Wow.
just kept asking God, what do you have for me right now? Um,
Oh, that's very comforting actually. I feel like for me and maybe somebody listening to know that like closed doors are answers too and um are do you know your Myers-Briggs by any chance?
I'm an INFJ.
INFJ. Oh, that's interesting. INFJ. Okay. Because I feel like you saying that you didn't really have a plan and you just kind of went with it. It just shows that you really how great your faith was. I think during those times. Because I feel like usually J's are a little more like this, but then maybe your N side is a little more open minded. I'm ESFJ, so I'm very like it's gotta be this way. And then David is ISFJ. So our poor children is like we expect like it's got to be like this, but thankfully they're a little more or that's not true. Eli's more like us, but then Zoe's a little our free spirit. So she lightens the mood in our
Oh,
family. But
that's
anyways,
so nice.
all that to say, I think it's really great that you were okay during those times though. Were you like able to recognize that, or do you feel like later you were able to recognize what God was doing? Was it frustrating in the moment, or were you like still just trusting what God was doing?
I think there was a lot of like paradoxical feelings there because I do feel like I felt all the extremes. So the answer is like
Mm.
yes to everything
Mm-hmm.
because there were times where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm wasting all this money
Mm.
and all this time. And, what am I even doing here? Or my research position after college, I lived with my parents. It was one of the hardest times. I did it for
Mm,
2 years, and um, I had already moved away for college, and so moving back in with my parents was tough,
mm,
and we didn't get along very well, and um, because I kept talking about missions, and they didn't like that, so it was a tough time for sure. But again, I think looking back, it's where it starts really to make sense and say, God really allowed that time to allow my parents and I to work on our relationship um,
mm,
during that time. Um, yeah. So yeah, I was impatient for sure throughout.
mm.
Um, that was in there.
Yeah, I think the reason I ask is just I feel like um, most of the time when we're in it, it doesn't really feel like, you know, God's plan in the moment, but definitely in self reflection, it's like, oh yeah, He had us the entire way, and I just wanted to know how maybe you took it, like, oh yeah, it's all good, but again, for me personally, it's encouraging to know that someone as accomplished as you um, had your downs too. So okay, so like after grad school, do you apply to CDC? Was that like you said you applied to a lot of jobs and then CDC was the one that was open for you?
Yeah, there's another phase in there after grad school where I
Okay.
actually couldn't find a job.
Uh-huh.
Same story of like I
Okay.
applied to a bunch of places. Um, and
Oh wait,
it
sorry,
was the same.
real quick before you
Yeah,
continue.
yeah.
Did you know what kind of job you were looking for or you're open to anything?
I was open to anything.
Okay, okay, okay.
I
Okay.
wanted to do something that used my grad school degree for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
But that was where I got into that thing of, well, I have no experience, so I can't get a job that I'm qualified. I'm not qualified to get the jobs that I want
Mm.
right out of grad school. So what I did was I ended up going to different um like I think I ended up going to some conference that was like public health related. It's very fuzzy. It's such a long time ago, but I went and like at conferences there's like lines and lines of booths of
Mhm,
people
mhm, mhm,
who
mhm.
are exhibiting. I just went down the line, and anytime I found one that I thought was interesting, I took their information and then I cold called every single one of them. I said, "Hey, I want to work for you." Ended up getting one job.
Good for you.
And
Good for you
yeah,
though.
I
I feel
worked
like people
at,
don't cold call anymore. So
yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, I worked at this one nonprofit for about a year on African American HIV/AIDS issues.
oh wow.
We um, we were doing a national coalition, like building a national coalition, and did some grant writing for them. And during that time, I was also preparing to actually become a full-time missionary. So that was just to pay the bills until I could get overseas. And then I spent a couple of years in Kenya and then a few years in Florida, the whole time being uh, serving as a missionary. So yeah, and then
What?
after that, when I left missions, then I started applying for CDC.
Who are you? That is so amazing. Okay, okay. I did not know any of this. Oh, I should have disclaimed this in the beginning. So you guys, Helen and I just started going to church together not too long ago, and I like jumped on her because I was like, "You work for the CDC? Do you want to be on my podcast?" Like that sounds interesting. So for me, it's really cool to be able to hear this part of your life because I'm just now getting to know you. So now I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, like I didn't realize you had this whole other chunk of your life before in the professional world of like, center of disease. And so Kenya, what were you doing there?
Yeah, so I felt really called to HIV/AIDS ministry.
Okay.
Um, and this happened during grad school. Actually, I was taking a class on the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and um, during that class, I was asking the question, what do you have for me, God? And I just started weeping. I wept for like the entire
Oh
quarter,
my goodness.
just like thinking about God's heart for
Mm.
this topic, and I heard someone's testimony at some point during that time where he said, I've done so many bad things, or I've done so many things. How could God ever possibly love me? And that
Mm.
stuck with me for years. And so I volunteered, or I connected with the missions agency through a conference, um, and told them I have my master's and I really want to work on HIV/AIDS. So they connected me with a health clinic system that they had set up in Kenya, to do home-based care for HIV/AIDS and um, help with uh, community outreach, as well as some administrative activities for their PEPFAR funds for getting treatment out to rural areas. Um, so
Wow.
yeah, I actually did get to use my degree on the field, so that was really neat. And I continued to get further into community health evangelism. So I worked with another organization and started setting up some projects there. Um, and yeah, it
Okay, so
was
we
it
have
was
to
a
talk
great time.
about this in depth because I really am curious now. So you said that you set up some projects. Were you about to
Mhm.
talk about that before I interrupted you, or were you just gonna move on? Because we
No.
need to stop and talk about these for a second. Because I'm so fascinated by even what that is, like the community. What did you call it? What is it called again?
Community health evangelism.
Community health evangelism. So these projects you described before as like you go into the community and you find out what it is the big issue is as a
Yeah,
whole, and then you start working from there, correct?
right.
Okay, so what were some of the projects that were like an initiative for you that you started?
Yeah, so there was this one place I visited where sorry, I'm like remembering it. Hold on one second. We so when I got there, sorry,
No, no, it's okay.
let me restart my story. I was visiting as a teacher, and I was like, yeah, I can talk on any topics, but public health and HIV/AIDS is really what I'd like to talk about. And they
Uh-huh.
were like, oh, cool, cool. Okay, well, come out to, the church at 2 o'clock and you can talk about that stuff. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I came like with all my materials planned, and people started trickling in, and then the translator showed up and he's like, okay, so you're ready to talk about hygiene? And I was like, hygiene? I have no materials for hygiene. I wasn't gonna do that. And he was
Uh-huh.
like, oh no, everybody's here for hygiene. And I was like, uh okay. So, I started a little bit to talk about hygiene, and then I was like, I'm just gonna start talking about what I came to talk about. Um and we started talking about the topic. um, One of the elders brought up the topic of wife sharing when I was talking about how HIV is passed.
Okay.
And a lot of communities don't talk about wife sharing openly to outsiders. And
Okay.
so the fact that they brought it up on their own and started discussing it was like a big deal.
Sure, yeah.
And basically, what it is anyone who is of the same age group, any man who is of the same age group, um, they have certain privileges that they share with one another. And one of them is if one of the men is on travel and his home is without a man, then any other man is allowed to go into that home and take his place for however long, a night, a few nights, whatever he
So this
wants
is
to
like
do.
a community thing.
Yes.
That's
And
insane. I
yeah,
mean, not to,
it was
it's just like so outside my purview that I can't even, that's so interesting. And even
right.
as like, what if, so the women have no say in this either.
No. Yeah. And interestingly, I was there as an unmarried 20-something-year-old.
Right, right.
So people addressed me as child because I was not married. So I didn't belong to any man. So
Okay.
that means I am a child.
I
I only
see.
become a woman when I belong to,
I see.
and it's belonging. It's like ownership and not
Got you. Got you.
marriage.
Okay. All
So,
right. So okay, so he asks you
right.
about
So he
this.
brings this up and he's
Okay.
like, wait a minute. Like if what you say is true, when we do this wife sharing, if like the first man had HIV and he had given it to his wife, then the second man who arrives could get HIV too.
Right.
Is that true? And I was like, yeah, that's true. Um, and so they started talking amongst themselves. And I was like to my translator, and he was like, something's happening and it's good. So just wait it
Wow.
out. So they started like amongst the men started talking and they were like, oh, this is a real problem. This is
That's
something we need to
crazy.
actually talk about.
Yes.
We can't just pretend it's not happening. Um, so over time, they started to identify the cultural value placed on wife sharing is really a lot of like face, um, saving face and like being considerate of their fellow age group
I see.
members. So they were like, well, over time they started planning. So this is like past the time that we were together, but they started making plans and saying, okay, well, we need to be able to accommodate for traveling shepherds. So people who are of the same age group who want to have a place to stay so that they don't have to lay in the same bed as our wife. So we need to build a separate home or a separate room for them, but we need money to do that. So they started like gathering their resources and actually like building on their houses, like separate areas for visiting men to spend the night, which solved the problem of taking care of each other without, talking about the issue
That
or, yeah,
that is
breaking code or whatever.
that is
Um,
so crazy. Like
yeah,
what's crazy to me is that if you had not talked about it and continued to talk about hygiene,
yeah,
like there would have been no like light bulb moment
yeah.
for this man who would boldly, I feel like it was probably boldly
Oh,
stepped up
yeah,
and was like, "Hey, but then that means this, right?" Like,
yeah.
and our women are probably, sick and dying, and men, without even
Hmm.
realizing what was happening. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
What year was this?
This was a while ago. So it was like 2005.
No, but I mean, even
Yeah.
then, it's not that long ago. Wow. Okay, so these were the kinds of things that were happening when you were in Kenya, like the types of projects that were kind of taking place and the conversations that were being had. Wow, this must have been so like such a, what is it? Fulfilling and like aha moment for you too. Like as a public
Yeah.
health servant, right? Like and
Yeah.
then being called to the mission field. Wow, the plan of God is so real for me right now. I'm like I'm all about it, Helen. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. It was
Okay.
definitely cool. And, like, it's those moments of like when things were taking off, outside of me. It's like I wasn't
Yes.
there. It's not for my glory. It's for God to show himself, for his spirit
Yeah.
to be moving and revealing truth and like saving people, right? And like doing the work there in those communities. Because I wasn't doing that.
I
I
know,
wasn't
but
telling
okay,
them
but
those
but
things,
but but like, it's just like if you hadn't stuck by faith to the journey, to the open doors that were being given, right? Like this abundant life that we talk about, right? Like that is
Yeah,
what happened in this community. It's like that
yeah,
was what was possible because of
yeah.
your education and like you know what I mean? Like just everything coming together. Wow, I'm like so amazed right now. That is so cool. Okay, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, yeah. So cool. Um, yeah. So I handed the baton to others when I ended up leaving. And I think,
Mm,
a lot of people did like more work on like um gardening, irrigation. Like they
mm,
have a real problem with drought, um, and like wells, did some well
right,
building.
water.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, rain tank.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was yeah, the things that took place after I left was almost just as rewarding. So I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like these communities are like really flourishing and finding ways to um make lasting change for their whole families.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah.
Sorry, you said Kenya and then you said one other place. That's
Yeah, I
something.
ended up serving in the home office in Florida.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Um,
So from there, I was helping to build our like global missions, global medical outreach.
okay.
So recruiting more people who were healthcare professionals and helping them get connected with, you know, fundraising as well as, I mean, support raising as well as like um, helping them get like funding for their like school loans and getting their things in order, and then placing them overseas. And I also worked with like our youth ministry, so I did like short-term projects to talk about like different topics related to youth and their health as well. Um, so I traveled to different places like Bulgaria and Thailand and Panama and Gabon in West Africa. Um, Actually, I traveled down the east coast of Africa too. So I've traveled a lot. Um, and yeah, always just teaching and talking about the core of, the things is like holistic ministry and just um, yeah, finding ways to connect the health issues with like the spiritual issues, with the social issues, economic and emotional issues, like the whole thing. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's amazing. So, why not stay there? Why move to the CDC?
Yeah, so I think we had been through some things. So the reason I left Kenya, first of all, was that my entire house burned down.
What?
Um, yeah, my house burned down
Like
and I
in
lost
Kenya or in
everything
America?
in Kenya.
Oh my gosh.
Um, and I lost everything I brought. I packed everything I owned and brought it to Kenya, and then my house burned down. So I had like nothing.
What? That's crazy. Um,
Yeah,
was it an accident or
it
like
was an accident. So I
okay.
had my home was had no electricity or running water or anything, and the refrigerator ran on gas, and the gas pilot light exploded, and so the whole gas tank exploded, and then the whole house caught fire really fast.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
and everybody was safe.
Okay.
Thankfully, no one got hurt, but it really was a stressor during my time there.
Sure. Yeah. I can only imagine that.
And
Okay.
yeah, it was tough to come back from that. I stayed for another year or so, but um, also during that second year, we had some like political unrest. And so there was
Mm,
like a lot of like gunfire and violence around where I was living. And so I actually ended up having to evacuate my area and work from a different location. And so that combined with the trauma of the whole time I was there, I
yeah.
decided I needed to home for a mental health break. And
Yes.
then ended up staying in the States after that. Didn't go back. So
Okay. So, and then that's what brought you to the Florida office, I'm assuming.
right,
Okay.
right. And then during my time in Florida, there were some other things that happened within an organization that made it hard to continue on with our work there.
I
And
see.
at the same time, my at the time husband went back to school for graphic design. So he applied to a few schools in the Atlanta area,
Mm-hmm.
and then we ended up moving here for his school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it just happened to be where CDC was, and I'd
Yeah.
always wanted to work there. So
Uh-huh.
it all worked out.
That's awesome. Okay, so you started at the CDC, and I guess the real question is like for someone listening to this podcast, and maybe you're associate director now, and it's like, okay, how do I do that? How do I get where she is now? Like, what kind of? I mean, you said that you had different roles, you wore different hats throughout the 10 years that you've been there, but like, do you? I don't know, like. Is there a right way or a wrong way to go about doing things if you want to pursue a career in the field that you're in?
Um, I think one of the keys to getting in the door is experience.
Mm,
Um, and um, I would say like the best thing to do is to look around at any local organizations where you might want to volunteer or work part-time and just, you know, connect with whoever is working in your area in the
mm,
field. Um, um, and I think too, the other thing is when I came in as a contractor, I didn't have any experience. So that's another way to get into CDC is there's probably like dozens of contracting organizations that hire people so that they can work in CDC as a contractor.
gotcha.
So I always tell people like find those contracting organizations, call them up and say, hey, I'm going to send my resume to you.
Mm,
And they'll keep it on file. And whenever like a contractor either quits or moves away or whatever, um, they call up all the people that they have resumes on file and they say, are you interested? So um, it's a pretty easy way, I think, to get in the door as well.
you know, you have been there for a while now. Is there, and like, you've kind of gone through, like you said, different types of jobs within the company. I don't, what do you call
Yes.
that?
Yeah.
um,
Agency.
um, Is there a reason you stayed? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a
Mhm.
long haul. Do you just like it there, or they treat you well at the CDC? I guess hopefully CDC is not listening, but
They'll hear you.
yeah.
Um, I would say one of my favorite things about working at the CDC is the people.
Mm,
I would say it's just filled with some of the greatest people. They have like such a passion for the science
wow.
and such a heart for the topics. So, people are very passionate and when they start like geeking out about data, it's like so cool. Like
Yeah, I
I
love
think it's
that.
so cool. And especially where I am right now, on, human development and disabilities, I feel like people are there because they have a reason to be there.
Mm.
So they care a ton, and and it comes through in all of our work. Um, so yeah, I think it's it's been inspiring, it's been challenging, um, and it is kind of my personality to get my hands in a lot of different kinds of things and learn all the time. So that's really appealing to me because every day is different.
Mm. Okay, well, you told us some things that you like about your job, but is there anything that you don't like about your job?
My number one thing I hate is public speaking. I really
Oh.
dislike talking in front of groups. Um, so yeah, part of my job is presenting. Oh, I really wish I did not have that uh, fear of public speaking. I also really dislike um, administrative tasks.
Mm.
I think that's probably anywhere you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
like policies and reading rules and
Oh man, but then like now that you have a higher position, isn't that like most of like do you have to do more public speaking and deal with
yeah, a
more
little.
policies?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. When I'm on calls of yeah, more than seven is my maximum. I feel comfortable up to seven, and more than that, it feels like a large group. And
Yeah, yeah,
um, yeah, when people call on me in meetings, I'm like, I just want to hide. I'm
yeah.
like, I know I'm like, we're even all remote. It still makes me nervous.
Right, right, right.
So stupid.
Oh man. No, but sometimes I feel like Zoom is worse. Like I don't know why, but just
Yeah.
during the pandemic, did you see some of those like accidents through Zoom? Like people like accidentally didn't know they were on the screen and like they went to the bathroom and stuff. Like so many
Oh
weird things.
yeah.
But it's like anyways,
Yeah.
I know that would
There.
never happen to us, but right? It would never happen. Knock on wood. But
Right.
well, Helen, we are rounding out our hour together. I am so grateful for your time this evening, but I do always ask people if they have any life advice, like, anything at all, like that you feel like if you maybe if you were younger, you'd want to tell yourself, or just something you've learned over the years.
Um, I'd say the more you trust that things are going to work out, I think the easier it becomes to trust
Mm,
that things are going to work out.
yeah.
Um, and I think, yeah, I just keep thinking like everything works out for people.
Mm,
God takes care of us. He loves us more than we love ourselves, and
yeah.
he'll work things out. He'll work out all the struggles, all the closed doors, all the hurdles in the way. Um, and if, and through the struggle, he'll show up too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I just think things will always work out.
Yeah. Um, no, definitely. I feel like I'm learning that more every day too. I think, as a new mom, can I still say I feel like a new mom still,
Oh,
but
yeah,
yeah.
you absolutely
But
can. Yeah.
and just like I mentioned earlier to you, like as a perfectionist my entire life, I've learned to just like, you know what? Like it doesn't work out how you always wanted to, but yes, trusting in God and trusting that there is a plan that He has for you and not your own, makes everything so much lighter and actually so much better because when you can fall into that plan He has, like you were talking about, I think it just gives you bigger and better perspective of what He's doing in my life and the life of other people's lives too. So, yeah, it's really good. Thank you so much for sharing that. Helen, I'm so sorry. I know I said that was my last question, But I did want to ask one more, and um, you you have two children, um, a girl and a boy, a middle schooler and an elementary schooler. Do you mind sharing a little bit on what it's like being a working mom?
It's a bit of a circus.
I can only imagine. Yes. No, I mean, the reason I ask is I will say that a lot of my guests are younger, and I do have older guests as well that have kids around the same age as yours, but um I don't get to talk about it too much, but I do feel like it's really important, and people maybe are curious, like, what's it like to, like, can I do it? Can I work and be a mom at the same time? I personally think you can. I don't do that currently myself, but yeah, if any, is there any wisdom that you can share? Yes, I'm sure it's a circus. I can't even imagine, because like I don't go into the office, and I don't do like the things that other people do, but even my life, is a circus. So yeah, what is the balance like for you?
Um, so I think like I think the key is to like think about like actually putting out my expectations into the forefront of my thinking, and to say, okay, those are my expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's adjust them to what I can do.
Ooh,
And
that's
I
good. Yes.
Yeah, because sometimes those expectations are like way back there,
Right,
and
right.
you're not even thinking, they're not on the awareness, you know, they're not in the forefront. So you're just expecting things, and then when it doesn't happen, it's like devastatingly disappointing.
Right,
Um,
right.
so yeah, so like I often need to like bring them out to the forefront, and I say them out loud, and I tell my kids,
Mm,
hey, this morning, for example, this morning, I even said this. I was like, I expect us to work together as a team to try and get out the
mm,
door on time. So let's all stay on track, even mommy. We're all going to try and stay on track and get our things together, get ourselves ready, and get out the door by this, such and such time.
oh, that
And
is so
today,
good.
it actually worked.
That's so good. I'm like, yes, I need to do that. That is so
Yeah,
good.
right?
Yeah,
Because the kids
yeah,
need to know.
yeah.
And so like, and in those times where like I haven't been able to like verbalize the stuff, or I've like
Mm,
made unfair expectations or whatever, and I get upset, or like feel guilty or whatever happened, then I'll also verbalize like, hey kids, like I I am sorry. Like I'm
mm,
feeling like I don't have much more to give right now, and
mm,
it's not your responsibility to shoulder that.
mm,
So let me take a break.
mhm,
I'll come back. We'll be okay. Mom's
mm.
okay. Um, but to like, it's always, that communication. And I think that's what keeps me going, of
Yeah.
like, our kids are there and they're seeing it all. They're not just, they're not just, you know, they're not just there, they're participating. So I
Mhm,
think like part of being a working mom and now a single mom, it's like remembering that um like they're playing an active role,
mhm.
and not that I rely on them as grown-ups at all, but that you know, I want them to be an active participant in the family. So it's
Mhm.
not all on me.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're like working together and
Mhm.
loving each other, and you know, learning what it means to love, learning what it means to show grace and support and communicate well and love each other well. So I think that's like a big part of me being as a working mom, is like learning how to have grace for myself, for
Mm-hmm.
my kids,
Mm-hmm.
because it's never smooth.
Yeah.
It's never this like shiny, ideal situation where like
Right.
things are easy and everything is clean and
Right.
organized. It's not that.
Nope.
um, and I take as many shortcuts as I can. That's
Mm.
the other thing. It's like I used to think I used to cook every night and pack every lunch, and um, those days are gone.
Mm.
So yeah, I do my very best to pick what I want to hold dear
Yeah.
and precious
Yeah.
and do those things. So that might be like cook a special meal once
Mm.
a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and let the rest go, because that doesn't matter and it just causes extra burden for me. So
Okay, well, that was the pep talk I needed on parenting. Thank you so much, Helen. After the day I had, man, I don't know what is going on with my kids. I think they're like, I like looked at David today and I was like, I think they're like, I don't know, going through another milestone or something. Like,
Oh my
what is
gosh, those milestones
happening?
kill me.
Like, I'm like, what is
Yeah.
going on? Like, what is wrong with my children? But anyways, but yes, okay, but all the things you just said was maybe not for our listeners, but for me right now.
Yeah. It's hard. Life is so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. But I like what you said about the balancing and what does balance look like? It's kind of setting those expectations in the forefront and also understanding that parenting doesn't look just this one way, right? Like, and
Yeah.
it's not even compromise. Like, that's not the word for me. It's more
Yeah.
like what is important to you, and the rest will work itself out. And that goes back to the whole trusting thing, right? Like, trusting that God is taking care of our children, and ah,
Yeah.
so hard, but like
It's so hard.
the control, right? That I
Yeah.
want. And yeah. Anyways.
And I will also say one last thing, like
Yeah.
that always brings me like the most amount of peace is like God is not surprised by our life, like he's not surprised that I'm a working mom right now. Like
Mm,
and for all the ways that he has loved me and provided for me and been faithful to me, he's doing the same thing for my kids right now.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
like all the ways that I have not been able to, where I've left huge gaps in my support for my kids, like those are the gaps that he's coming to fill for them. And that's going to be part of their story of how
Mm,
God met them in this time. And I just have to trust that story that he's writing in my life, he's also writing in Moses's life and Eden's life
yeah.
simultaneously.
Right. Right.
And he's taking care of them way better and filling in those gaps way better than I could ever imagine, even if I were there for them all the time, 100%, which even that doesn't ever happen.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, this is it. None of this is a surprise, and God is like never late. He's always on time, and he's
yes.
always filling those gaps
I
for
love
us.
that. Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so good. Yeah, he's not surprised.
Yeah.
He's not surprised. Well, Helen, thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate everything you said tonight. Is it okay if someone maybe is listening is like, hey, like I want to know more about what she does, or even just your journey up until now? Would you be okay with me connecting you with them?
I would love that.
Oh, great. That's great. So, guys, you heard it. If you heard anything interesting in this podcast and you wanted to learn more, please feel free to reach out to me. You can DM me on social media or you can email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com and I will get you connected with Helen. Helen, thank you again. You are amazing. Yeah, I'm just so appreciative of the journey and your story today.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Until next time, guys. Bye.
Bye.